Vince Velasquez, we'll dive into him here with Corey Seidman from CSN Philly, CSNPhilly.com in just a second. Vince Velasquez, I saw a tweet last night, or maybe it was this morning. I wrote an article based on the tweet because it really opened my eyes a lot to this talented electric arm who has been somewhat of a disappointment. He's dazzled at times, but as Matt Breen tweets, Velasquez has pitched 6 innings or less in 23 of 26 starts with the Phillies. That's no good. That's not a quality start, Corey. And sometimes he dazzles, but you see something like that and you wonder, is Vince Velasquez, made out for this starting role that the Phillies are really thrusting him into here?
Season, and that the Phillies are going to give him an entire second season to try to gauge that very question. Pete Mackanin said last night, what's the alternative? And right now there is no alternative. It's not like there's anybody at AAA that's really beating down the door to get to the majors and take Velasquez's spot in the rotation. And, keep in mind, he's a part of their future. The Phillies traded Ken Giles to Houston, and Vince Velasquez was the centerpiece of the return. And they didn't make that trade with the idea of simply replacing Ken Giles in the 9th inning with Velasquez a couple years later. We've seen the flashes, the 16 strikeout shutout early last season. But too often what happens with Vince Velasquez is he'll get to an 0-2, 1-2 count that quickly becomes a 3-2 count. The foul balls occur. The pitch count soars. He's thrown 194 pitches so far in 7 innings this season, or rather 9 innings this season. That's an average of 21.3 pitches per inning, which is right at the top of Major League Baseball. He's right toward the bottom of Major League Baseball in innings per start since the beginning of last year. He's also third in baseball over that span among starting pitchers in strikeouts per 9 innings. But strikeouts per 9 innings is a stat that almost shouldn't even apply to Vince Velasquez. It's almost strikeouts per 5 innings. Because that's the length. That's the length he's been giving the Phillies lately.
Yeah, you're right about that. And and the long balls hurt him too. It just the pitch counts have killed him. So even games where he pitches well, they got to get him out of games a lot because his pitch count gets up there for him. And Corey, do you agree though? And you make a good point that they make the trade for Giles not just to replace him with Velasquez, but that they don't have any alternatives. I think part of the reason why you're intrigued by Velasquez is they have depth in the rotation. So if you're willing to give Velasquez a full season of going out there and getting pulled after 5 or 6, why not Jake Thompson or Zach Eflin or one of the other Ben Lively? Why not give them the same opportunity?
Well, there's a massive difference in terms of the repertoire and the stuff that those pitchers has. I mean, Vince Velasquez is really the first true fireballer that the Phillies have had in the starting rotation. I mean, I'm going all the way back here to maybe Brett Myers at the beginning of his career. It's been that long since the Phillies have had a guy who averages this kind of velocity, and that plays at this level. I mean, it plays – you can see it on a pitch-by-pitch basis with the swings and misses, with all the strikeouts, which does provide Velasquez a little bit of encouragement that there's light at the end of the tunnel. He said as much Wednesday night, even though he was very harsh of his own performance. When you look at guys like Ben Lively, Jake Thompson, Zach Eflin in that AAA rotation, Ben Lively throws in the upper 80s. Jake Thompson throws in the low 90s and relies on his sinker. Zach Eflin is at about 4.5 strikeouts per 9 innings, 5 strikeouts per 9 innings throughout his minor league career. So in terms of swinging this stuff, in terms of just pure raw talent, we're talking about guys in completely different classes. And because Velasquez is so far and away better than those guys in terms of his fastball curveball combination, the Phillies are going to give him many opportunities. And really, with another season like this where the Phillies are not expected to contend, why not give Vince Velasquez at least 20 of these starts, see what happens? I mean, to your point, it's rough because even when Vince Velasquez does pitch well, it still requires at least 3 scoreless innings from the bullpen. So it sets the Phillies up in a bad place bullpen-wise. If he's not getting run support early in games, the Phillies are on the losing end of a lot of them. But there's so much tantalizing talent in that arm of his that you have to go long term with this. And if we're still talking about it in mid-July, then maybe it's time to make a change.
Well, Corey, I do agree with you on the stuff part of it. He's got way better stuff than all of those guys that I mentioned.
Yeah, and Corey, I want to know, do you think then Velasquez is better off as a starter or a closer? Where do you see his future?
Well, there's no doubt in my mind that he would be in a very effective 8th inning or 9th inning pitcher. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind because he misses so many bats. And what's weird about Velasquez is it seems like it's either a swing and miss or it's really loud contact. And that is the one thing that might give you pause about him in that ninth inning, because he's prone to lapses with his control. And when you're putting men on base, it's way more costly as a reliever than it is with a starter, when you can kind of maneuver out of jams and you have more time to work. But, there's no doubt in my mind that if the Phillies put Vince Velasquez in the 8th or 9th inning, that he'd have a lot of success. He'd strike out a ton of batters. He already has kind of that closer's mentality. But a starting pitcher just has so much more value than a reliever. That's why the Phillies made the Ken Giles trade in the first place. They saw an opportunity to turn a young pitcher who throws about 65 innings per year into a young pitcher who has the potential to throw 180 innings per year. So that's what the Phillies still want to do with Vince Velasquez, and I really believe that he will get at least 20 to 25 starts to try to turn things around.
Corey Seidman with us, CSN Phillies analyst. Corey, I saw a tweet last night. It's probably my favorite. It said Clay Buchholz, $337,500 for each of the 40 batters he faced this season. Good work if you can get it. I mean, Buchholz, is he done? A visit to Dr. James Andrews is never usually a good sign.
No, I would highly expect that Clay Buchholz is going to be out at least through the All-Star break. You might have seen him throw his last pitch in Philadelphia. The diagnosis was a partial tear of his right flexor pronator mass, which is a muscle that's kind of in that forearm or elbow area. This injury, Clay Buchholz suffered to a lesser degree in 2015 in July of that year, and it ended his season. This is also a similar injury to the one that ended Cliff Lee's career in late 2014. So certainly not a good sign. The Phillies took a chance with Clay Buchholz. They acquired him for, like a C-level prospect, Josh Tobias, the second baseman. And their thought process there, Matt Klintak's thought process there, was try to do what they did with Jeremy Hellickson a year earlier. You're not worried about how much money you're spending because the Phillies had so much payroll space open. So they brought in Clay Buchholz. The Red Sox wanted to dump his salary. The Phillies took on $13.5 million with the goal of potentially flipping him at the deadline for something valuable. Well, that's not going to happen now, regardless of whether Buchholz is out for the season or not. I questioned the trade at the time. I didn't see it as a very high upside move because I doubted that the Phillies would be able to bring back a prospect better than the one they gave up. That's not because I'm so high on Josh Tobias, but that's because I'm so low on Clay Buchholz. He's a guy who's been very inconsistent throughout his career, and when you watch him start by start, he's just not a guy that entices other teams. He takes forever in between pitches, the fourth slowest pace in baseball in between pitches over the last 3 seasons, a lot of base runners, a lot of just high-stress innings, and that's not going to be too attractive to other teams.
And nice job with what his injury is there, Dr. Seidman. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
You've led right into my next point, by the way. Should the Phillies maybe get out of the business of bringing in and counting on these veteran pitchers with the hopes of spinning them off for a low-level prospect? I mean, flip this pitcher. Look at me. Whee!
Well, so this is the thing. Next year, the Phillies have $6.8 million committed to payroll. That's it, $6.8 million, and half of that is money that they're still paying Cole Hamels. Now, when you account for the guys that are going to go to arbitration and even the pre-arbitration guys, that's going to raise it to about $20 million. But this is a team that spent about $175 million when they were contending, so there's still so much money that they have available. So what they've tried to do is, like we've said, they've tried to bring in these guys who have high salaries that have fallen out of favor with other teams, try to flip them. With Clay Buchholz, I think one of the other reasons they brought him in was because they were unsure when Zach Eflin was going to be ready. He had 2 knee surgeries late last season. Jake Thompson struggled last season when he came up to the majors. So the Phillies wanted to create a little more rotation depth, and they thought that Buchholz would be a better option than like an Adam Morgan or a Jake Thompson early in the season. I still think that the Phillies should be creative. I still think that those are the kinds of trades that do make sense for a team that's a couple of years away. Take on gargantuan salaries from other teams, and, maybe in taking on a gargantuan salary, a team gives you a big prospect. Like, think about this. When the Phillies had Ryan Howard all those years, and he was making $25 million a year, and the salary was bloated, and it was affecting what they were able to do with other guys, they probably would have jumped at the chance to trade Ryan Howard to another team, even if they had to include a somewhat decent prospect to do it, because it would have rid them of that salary. So I think that the Phillies should be creative in that way, but it's all about getting the right guy. Jeremy Hellickson is the right type of guy because he's very consistent and he keeps you in games. Clay Buchholz is the opposite.
Corey Seidman, CSN Philly, CSNPhilly.com. Real quick, Corey, we know that many people have their eyes on AAA, and a lot of pitching down there. But how about some of the offensive players? Is there anybody down there that you're keeping an eye on that may force their way up here sooner than later if this Phillies team continues to struggle in the win column?
Well, the three best hitters at AAA right now, if I had to say right now, are Roman Quinn, who we saw last September. He's off to another hot start. He seems to hit well in April every year. I mean, the problem with him is that he's been unable to stay healthy for a long period of time, and this is his first chance to play at AAA, and he's thriving. Rhys Hoskins, the first baseman, who hit 38 home runs last year at AA, and also did so with a high on-base percentage, he's off to a very good start at AAA as well, and Phillies director of player development, Joe Jordan, said before the season that he thinks that Rhys Hoskins is the smartest hitter on that AAA team, which that's pretty high praise when you consider all the prospects that are there. The third guy that I want to mention is Jorge Alfaro, the catcher. I've said it many times over the last couple of years that I think he has the chance to be the most impactful of all of these Phillies prospects because of his two-way ability, his ability to control a running game and also hit for power from a position that really across baseball, there are few offensive threats behind the plate, and Jorge Alfaro has a chance to be a big one. I mean, I look at a couple days ago when Cameron Rupp came up with the bases loaded. Imagine when that's Jorge Alfaro batting with the bases loaded. It's going to be a completely different vibe. And, J.P. Crawford is a guy that you have to mention as well, but he's off to a very slow start at AAA. I think he's hitting right around 100. He has 1 walk and 9 strikeouts. And now in 410 plate appearances at AAA, dating back to last season, Crawford's hit under 240 with an on-base percentage right around 320. So his hype and, all of the things that you hear people praise him for, it really hasn't matched the level of production to this point.
And how long will it take before the Phillies fans start asking for these guys to come up and play in Philadelphia if things continue to go the way the season has started? Corey Seidman, CSN Philly, CSNPhilly.com. Phillies, of course, get swept by the Mets. And, you see that Met team. That's a World Series caliber team right there. Phillies are far way off from where the Mets are right now. Corey, great stuff, man. We appreciate the time.
Anytime, guys.